Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to the International Symposium on the New Paradigm in Politics of the Laszlo Institute of New Paradigm Research. So this is day 3. This is where we pull it all together. It's a 3-day event. And so today we are going to be pulling together and harvesting what we have learned, discussed, co-created, and co-emerged, truly a field of intention that we have around new paradigm in politics. And again, the Laszlo Institute is dedicated to exploring, furthering, and bringing into practice the lessons from the sciences that present our fundamental interconnectedness based on what we are seeing as the macro patterns in the cosmos and the universe as a whole, and the micro patterns of subtle connections from the quantum realm. So what that means for us as human beings in the meso level, right in between the very large and the very small, those levels of coherence, what does that mean for us in terms of our patterns of behavior, where we truly act as though, not only as though, but informed by our fundamental interdependence, interconnectedness, and as we discussed yesterday, what this means for the interbeing of our shared expression of how to human well on this planet. So now, in this session, we're going to be working with you throughout the day on exploring what it means to actually bring this into a set of principles that we can act upon. But we will design that entire thing with you. While we arrive here, and I'm happy to see that Irvin is here too, we'll get a word from him in just a moment. But before we begin, I would just invite everyone to arrive and to breathe in with me this sense of interconnectedness. I'm going to share with you a little bit of my flute. Ashe, thank you. And thank you everyone for being here and for tuning and toning in. I was talking about this with Anneloes Smitsman before, and she will be running the day primarily. I will be supporting her throughout the day. But she was saying how the sacred coherence that we are exploring together here is very nicely represented by the tones of the flute. She mentioned how we can think of the many holes on the flute as ways of amplifying and attuning the diversity of our individual voices. So, and bearing in mind one of my favorite quotes that I shared earlier from Hafiz, who says, I am the hole on the flute through which God's breath blows, or I am the hole on the flute through which the universe expresses. So today, the invitation is to share our own impulse to express and be expressed by these fundamental flows that are moving towards holotropism, towards this sense of interdependence, interconnectedness, and interbeing in the universe. Day 1, we explored what my mentor and teacher from the Social System Sciences program, Russell Akoff, would call formulating the mess. We explored what in the world is happening in the world in the dimensions of self-governance, dimensions of policy and democracy and other frames of collective decision-making. So formulating the mess was kind of the theme for day one. How did we get here? What's going on? And what are the signs of change we need to pay attention to? Day two, yesterday, was exploring what are the emerging signs of hope and what are some examples of ways of being that express this interconnectedness. We even had a little demonstration showcase among leaders of networks that showed the movement from individual consciousness to an expression of collective consciousness and interbeing at the end of that. And in the last session, we kind of prepared for today, which is going to be about looking at the principles for practice of a new paradigm in self-governance frames. So we're looking at the elements of a constitution today. Anneloes will tell us more about that in just a moment. We have a special guest that we're going to introduce in a moment, and I'm going to hand it over to our director of Symposia. But before I do that, I would like to invite Irvin, if you have any welcoming messages for today, to share.
Well, Alexander, thank you for leading this in, and welcome everybody. A word to say this: the Laszlo Institute doesn't wish to conduct the events that it's making. It wishes to provide a platform. We hope to identify areas that need new thinking, that need a new paradigm. Politics is one such area. It's not the only one, but it's a very important area. It's how we manage our affairs in society on this planet. Badly managed so far. I mean, it's a very outdated form of management. So we need something new. The Institute per se is not saying what that something new is. We provided a white paper and we provided a platform. And from now on, and from that moment on, already 2 days ago, it was up to all our participants and everybody who listens in or looks in on the internet to work together. We identify the issues and we provide you a place in which to discuss them. And when you come to conclusions, which we hope that you will today, we are dedicated to disseminating that and to bringing it to decision makers, to young people, to whoever is interested and important to understand that we need a new paradigm for the way we think of ourselves in society and the way we manage ourselves. That much said, I hand it now over to Alexander and to Anneloes and our special guest to carry forward this date. You have my great expectations. I'll be sitting here and watching what is happening. We're looking forward to it. It's important, and I think you are up to doing it. So let's do it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we are going to be weaving you back in, I'm sure, on several occasions. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this over to Bill Stranger. William Stranger is the director of Symposia of the Laszlo Institute of New Paradigm Research. And he is the one who's actually the master of ceremony, holding the whole program in his hands. And so, Bill, thank you so much for doing that. And I pass you now the microphone.
Thank you, Alexander and Urban both. And again, and welcome. Just a little bit addition to the summary of our first 2 days, because many of you who missed this or may want to return to it will want to know that in the first day, we moved on from our kind of situation report, daunting but not devastating, to a deep consideration of the principles of the new paradigm. That was an extraordinary conversation, and then to a conversation with 4 activists operating from the international to the local level. So we've kind of been ramping up on this shaping of what this new paradigm is about. Yesterday, we actually got into it much more and had some interesting demonstrations and dialogues. Today, this is our co-creation, as Alexander said, the workshop together. And to lead us in, I'm delighted to introduce one of the true eminences of the environmental movement in the United States, David Orr. A resume too long to give you in my brief introduction here, other than to say that his numerous books, very gracious books on not only environmentalism, but design and politics, and his own activism and work with sustainability and altogether a political regeneration of our culture around this matter of not only sustainability and cultural renewal, led him to designing one of the first carbon neutral buildings in the United States at Oberlin, which won an award as one of the 30 most important buildings of the 20th century, developing the Oberlin project of a university, coordinating with its own community, a model for our own vision of the California College of Regenerative Design. But most recently, and probably perhaps most importantly for all of us, is the work he's been doing on democracy. And his Democracy Unchained book is a chronicle of writings by authors, many of whom appeared in his a really stellar series of interviews that now are available on YouTube called Democracy Unchained, a conversation series. So Democracy Unchained, this is a remarkable series. I know we're a global event here, and this is concentrating mostly on the issues of democracy in the United States. But as it turns out, issues about the survival and health of democracy in the United States pretty much mirror the same discussions going around the rest of the world. And this remarkable series is a great resource for our own citizen reconfiguration. And I would just advise you to look at that and then look at the book that David co-edited with several other authors. Many of the stellar people who appeared in that series, Democracy Unchained, How to Rebuild Government for the People. So we're really lucky. I feel hugely fortunate to have David Orr. Welcome so much to you for stepping in here and giving us our opening briefing. David realized a number of years ago that the environmental movement made a mistake in not also in thinking that everybody would understand that maintaining the sanity and safety and well-being and integrity of our planet would be beyond political divisions and beyond dispute for all of us. Turned out not to be so. And so that we in the environmental movement, sustainability, spiritual orientation, didn't quite find our way into dealing with the actual rough and tumble of politics and to restore a true democratic process that educates the polity to making the collective decisions we need to make. So he's spent a great deal of time in the recent years on this Restoring American Democracy project, bringing together leaders throughout the country in government, both elected and high-level appointees, academia, activists, and a series of dialogues about what it's going to take. And I think those series of dialogues, which I was pointing to on YouTube, are salutary for all of us. They really go through what it's going to take for us to start to work this process into the popular mind. And that's what led to that book, Democracy Unchained, with 36 authors and so on. So he's been, at the same time, people may want to know that he created a thing called the Meadow Creek Project in northern Arkansas a number of years ago. That was one of the first events that brought people like Hillary Clinton and Wendell Berry into the same room, where you'd see, like as Gene Houston has consulted government leaders. It's a place where they had, in a very informal circumstance, a ranch-like circumstance, to have these long-lasting discussions. And that really made a difference in building in a bedrock understanding of not only the environment, but also the spiritual basis of our cultural transformation. So David's been having strong, big legs in both worlds, with a background that began in political science, moved on more and more into environmentalism and even environmental design, where he's won awards.
Bill, thank you so much. It's great to be on the program, and I appreciate all of you and the work of the last 2 days, but more importantly, and Irvin, we've not met in person, but in 1972, I read your book on systems approach to philosophy at the recommendation of Richard Falk, a friend of both of ours. But thanks to all of you, and Bill, thanks for a great introduction and for your work as well. I'm going to be fairly brief. I've got 15 minutes, and what I'd like to do is to show some slides. Let me begin by describing the title of this is The Long Emergency, Democracy in the Long Emergency. And so the thought today is drawn from what Bill described as the State of American Democracy, a conversation that we launched at Oberlin in 2017. It resulted in the book. You've seen this on the screen already. Let me begin with the assumptions that we're making. I don't think democracy will survive climate chaos. I think we have ample reason to believe that that's not going to be possible. But on the other hand, if we don't stabilize the climate, we're not likely, or we cannot stabilize the climate without an improved, robust, resilient democracy. But that isn't just a slightly improved democracy. It requires, among other things, extending legal rights to future generations, ending the practice of ecocide, limits on technology, primarily including artificial intelligence. And then the question comes up, is that possible? And so if you imagine democracy as a bit of a journey that goes for, well, started with tribal societies and through India and Greece and up to the present world situation of democracy, it's been a long road, but we're not there yet. And there is ample reason, as John Kane and John Werner Mueller have said, to be very skeptical about democracy. The long emergency is simply given in this, and you covered this in the first 2 days amply, but climate change in particular is a long process. So the quote on the screen is from David Archer, a climate physicist, who notes that a quarter of the climate that we emit today will still be in the atmosphere affecting climate 1,000 years from now. So the idea of democracy is a contingent idea, most famously in the Western world, but not exclusively, but in the Western world, we associate that with what happened in the Greek Agora and Greek democracy, but that was also a contingent thing. And there's on the screen, everything that you see on the screen is familiar to all of you, is the daily headlines, particularly the cause of all these evils is the love of power. Due to ambition and greed, neither justice nor the needs of the state restrained them. Their only limit was the caprice of the hour. They were prepared to satisfy a momentary rivalry by the unjust condemnation of an opponent or by forcible seizure of power. There was no reconciling force, no promise binding, no oath that inspired awe. That is so familiar that it needs no further explanation. The case for democracy, however, I think could be made in many ways. Let me outline three. Shoshana Zuboff, who is author of a great book recently on technology and called Surveillance Capitalism, where she says the one idea to have emerged from the long story of human oppression that insists upon people's inalienable right to rule themselves. C.S. Lewis described this as the real reason for democracy is that mankind is so fallen that no man can be trusted with unchecked power over his fellows. No men are fit to be masters. W.E.B. Du Bois in 1920 said this kind of differently, but describes this as being a society-wide effort to harness the creativity and talents and patriotism and efforts of literally billions of people around the earth. He said it differently, but the point is the same. Democracy, at its very best, is an inclusive concept that harnesses the talents and abilities and energies of millions of people. But it is contingent. And we now are familiar with lots of the literature on how democracies die and their flawed side, and particularly work of, say, Timothy Snyder on tyranny. The second point here is, are we a democracy? And on this, there's ample reason to be skeptical. There's a debate around the world about democracy and the capacities of democratic societies. The Economist put it this way in their 2020 index, the US is a flawed democracy, but you can see democracy being challenged virtually everywhere. In the case of the United States, it's clear that we're really not a democracy, and what democracy remains in the United States hangs by a very slender thread. We're in what's being called an epistemic crisis right now, where even the basis of reality, facts, are being questioned. And you can't run a democracy or can't have a democracy without a common set of facts and an agreed upon history, at least within certain boundaries. What happened has been amply debated, but let me highlight a couple of things. One is the way neoliberal society was organized, beginning with the Montpelier Society, you've probably discussed and all of you know about. Beginning in 1947, Frederick Hayek and Milton Friedman were predominant people at that. In direct contrast to the thinking of Karl Polanyi in his great book, The Great Transformation. But the basic idea here was that the market would take over and it could do things much better than government. And so there was a 40 or 50-year war waged in the United States and throughout this neoliberal world on the very idea of governance. Governments were under attack for all kinds of reasons and have been largely shrunk in purpose and ambition and our sense of creativity about what governments can do. Ayn Rand became the spokesperson for a good bit of this. I think among the right wing in the United States, at least, her writings have been incredibly influential. As a result, our political dialogue has shifted steadily to the right. Think of this as bookends narrowing, so that the ideas of how we solve public problems and how we do the public business in the United States, in Europe, and elsewhere has shrunk to a few ideas. Many are verboten. Nancy MacLean's, the cover of Nancy MacLean's book, Democracy Unchained, is in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. It's an excellent book, and what she describes is the use of ideas in university capacities by James Buchanan, funded by the Koch brothers and Major Money, to help drive the discussion to the left, probably to the right wing, hard to the right. The result of all of this is the concentration of money and the shrinking of our collective power of we the people. So you could take the 8 billionaires, many of which are headed into outer space for some reason. Probably this is down to 4 now. 4 billionaires about have the same amount of net wealth as the poorest half of the human population on Earth. And the question comes up, so what? And there are people who argue for government by expertise, what's called an epistocracy of expertocracy. And one could say that maybe professionalism ought to rule. There's certainly a case to be made for that. But I think it's a poor case. And part of the difficulty is that this issue of cascading systemic failures, we're seeing that all over the world now. Climate change from ocean acidification, species extinction, wildfires, larger floods, bigger storms, rising sea levels, and so forth. Driving all of this, or much of this, is carbon dioxide and the fact that we are powered very much by fossil fuels. This chart just shows the development of fossil fuels since the mid-70s up to the present. We're now a little over 420 parts per million carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The baseline, of course, as all of you know, was 280 parts per million. Among the worries here is that I see no particular reason why we could not have a solar-powered, sustainable, efficient, resilient, fascist society. And by that, I mean one dominated by the military, police, corporations, banks, the top 1% or the top 100 to 1%, controlled media, racial persecution, closed borders, violence, mendacity, and climate denial. Much of what we see emerging, certainly in the United States and some parts of Europe today. How do we go forward in this? Everything I've said is more or less common knowledge. So how do we proceed? And much of the dialogue, as I understand it, in the first 2 days, dealt with this. How do we begin to shift ideas? This is a cartoonist way to begin to propose, how do we get past the right-wing dogma and begin to move toward a much broader, deeper concept of the public? At our conference in 2017 on the state of American democracy, William Barber spoke, and one of the things he said that caught my attention was this on the screen: our ideas are too puny for our circumstances. Now is the time for large ideas, and most all of you on this program are conversing with large ideas and propagated many big ideas. And this is the time for large ideas that connect with a very practical reality. Naomi Klein put it this way: the fetish of centrism, she called it, of reasonableness, seriousness, splitting the difference, and generally not overly getting excited about anything. This is a habit of thought that truly rules our era. It certainly does in the academy, where I've spent a good part of my professional life. Climate change presents a profound challenge to this cautious centrism because half measures won't cut it. And to put this in a different context, if we were to look at our agenda in terms of the way Earth works as a physical system, the great challenge of our time is how do we calibrate virtually everything in society, certainly governance and politics and the economy and habitats, and the way we design cities, and agriculture, and so forth, to the way the Earth works as a physical system. If we had begun in any of those areas with the understanding of how Earth works as a physical system, also as a moral system, with these complicated feedback loops, positive and negative, leads and lags, a world full of surprises, stocks and flows, we would have done things radically different. We designed a world alien to the planet on which we live. The ideas that we are propagating, I think, are old ideas. Thomas Jefferson said this: the earth belongs in use to the living. The dead have neither rights or powers over it. The very next year, Edmund Burke, in his book, Reflections on the Revolution in France, described society as a partnership not only between those who are living, those who are dead, those who are yet to be born, a partnership across generations. and in our time across species itself. Anne Spern, one of the great designers in the world, puts it this way in describing how the left and the right come together. She puts it, now is the time for telling new tales, for retelling old dilemmas, how to live in the world and preserve it, how to sustain tradition and foster invention, how to promote freedom and cultivate order, how to forge identity and value difference, how to appreciate the parts and grasp the whole. Now, the problem is that with the world of ideas, we've got to connect with the practical world. Frederick Douglass, the great American, African-American, who was the primary voice for anti-racism and for getting blacks to vote and so forth in the Civil War and in the later part of the 19th century, put it, power concedes nothing without a demand. Never did, it never will. In the world in which he was describing, this is John Lewis in the forefront, the great American political leader, in a battle with armed forces in Selma, Alabama in the mid-1950s. In this scene, in this great movie, Paul Newman confronts a guy with a knife. And the question here Paul Newman is raising is, the title of this segment is Guns or Knives, Butch? And too often in these kind of settings, we on the progressive side of politics bring a ping pong battle to what is a lethal combat. There's money and there's hard politics involved. And much of the decline or current threat to democracy has been a result of our bringing inappropriate weapons and ideas to that battle. Let me close this with a couple of final thoughts. The upshot, I think, for all of us is an entirely solar powered world. The world makes the transition away from fossil fuels. A world that begins to handle violence in very different ways, and maybe propose that grandmothers, only grandmothers, can start a war, certainly the nuclear war. The profits from weapons ought to be confiscated. Voting rights are guaranteed everywhere. The people do matter. They're given the dignity and the chance to vote. Political campaigns should be publicly financed 100%. No one on earth makes, say, more than 10% of the poorest. And posterity has a rights to life, liberty, and property. Animals, rivers, forests, landscapes have legal standing. A major paradigm shift that all of you are familiar with and all of you have worked to bring about. In short, Greta Thunberg, give her the last word here. Tell the truth. And the truth is we are in difficult circumstances. And it will take all the ideas that we can muster here, and thanks to all of you for helping bring new ideas and new paradigms into being, to tell the truth about where we are. And part of the truth is we're not done yet. We have the ability to make it. Let me close then with a profound thank you to all of you, and Alexander to you, and Bill to you for organizing all of this. My email address is on the screen, and then the State of American Democracy website is at the bottom of the screen. I'll close there.
Excellent. And we're all back here. Thank you so much, David. That was fantastic and very, very informative, and the kind of background setting that we need to exactly move into the next section. And also I'm going to hand it directly over to you. We're running a little bit behind time, but hopefully we'll be able to make it up now in our collaboration space. On to you, Anneloes.
Thank you so much. And thank you, David, for that very insightful presentation. Just as a reflection on what you're sharing, there's two ways to look at democracy, whether it's death, dying, or coming alive. Democracy also came as a reaction against the aristocrats decades ago. So perhaps the fact that people are not participating in the old form of democracy is a clear sign that democracy is alive and it's itself transforming and it's shifting its focus. And that's why also what we're exploring today, we make a distinction between governments and governance. And what we can see is that there are all kinds of experiments popping up around the world where people are taking governance into their own hands and experimenting with whole new ways of democratizing their own creativity, their skills, their participation, the co-creation of new ecosystems of learning, of economics. So in that spirit, it might be good to have a look at how is the spirit of democracy itself alive within us, and perhaps even ushering us to explore new ways of engagement, new ways of governing, and then learning how to steward our earth together. And with that, I'm going to be sharing with all of you a case study. And this case study is called Seeds. And Seeds started as an experiment many, many years ago of a group of people who took what Buckminster Fuller had said to heart, don't fight the old systems, just co-create a better model. And they've been very successful in drawing in more and more people. I joined them a year ago as one of its architects for the Constitution. And now we've grown to 8,000 people who are part of this, 450 organizations, providing funding for over 250 organizations with over 330 citizens. So I'm going to be sharing with all of you a case study from there to just give you an idea of what else is possible. And I'll be going through this presentation for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we're going to do something experimental, and that is a visioning session. So I'm going to be guiding you then after that to really imagine a future world of a new paradigm, politics and governance.
While most of us dream of recreating a cleaner, greener, and more beautiful world, the financial system has very different priorities. It relies on infinite exploitation to feed a dream of endless growth. In reality, though, our lives depend on one planet with finite resources. And with that planet in the midst of a climate crisis, this disconnect between our financial system and our ecosystem is one we can no longer afford. Seeds offers a solution, a movement that allows us to share financial success, distribute value fairly, and move towards the common vision of a thriving civilization. Seeds gives humanity the tools to reimagine what money can be and do. A financial ecosystem designed to regenerate our planet. Seeds, all uppercase, is the ecosystem's name, and Seeds, capital S, is its currency. One that's already rewarding the people and organizations, creating a healthier, more equal, and abundant world. Seeds uses cutting-edge technology aimed at creating a more healthy and stable economy, and there are no fees for using it. In fact, the more you exchange, the more value you help create. Value that Seeds reinvests in the planet via grants to community projects, regenerative businesses, and movements. Better still, as the value of Seeds grows, it flows to all members of the Seeds ecosystem, not based on wealth, but on how much they contribute to healing the planet and shaping Seeds itself. That's right, Seeds is a true democracy that lets us all own the change we want to see in the world. Finally, a financial system by the people, for the people, to regenerate our planet.
And then here is a very high-level overview of the ecosystem of Seeds. And yesterday we talked about holarchy and holonic architecture based on living systems. Well, here you see an application of that. I won't be going into all the details. There's a lot of information on the Seeds website where you can get all of this. But I think this also aligns beautifully with Erwin Laszlo's white paper, which was really the inspiration for this conference. And we see here the practical application. But behind that, there is also a constitution. And when we talk about a constitution here, we're not just talking about a nice piece of paper or a constitution of a business organization. We're really talking about a constitution that is truly serving as a foundation now for the design of all those protocols, the architecture, how we, the kind of governance that we are creating. And I just want you to have a little bit of an idea of what is behind all of this. So starting with the first draft, on Earth Day 2020, it went through 8 different versions. We had 8 constitutional assemblies through which we went through a very in-depth visioning process as well, and similar to what we're going to be doing today. 12 plus months of passionate discussions, over 1,500 comments, 120 plus regenerators across the earth participated and contributed. So it was truly a democratic way in which this constitution came about. And we also would like to kind of presence that with the expectations of today. Today, we're not going to make a new Earth constitution. What we're doing is exploring what would be the steps, the actions, the forms of collaboration, the preparation towards possibly the making of new constitutions, not just one, but a diversity of constitutions, as well as perhaps a new kind of spirit of an Earth constitution. Okay, so this is a brief overview of the whole constitution. There's a part 1, part 2. And part one of the Constitution is based on a cosmic compass design, which also features in the book that I wrote together with my dear friend Jean Houston, who is also with us on the call. And that we've just published our book in The Quest of Rose, which is the first book of the Future Humans trilogy. For those of you who really want to take an in-depth view of this cosmic compass, you will find it there. And also in our last session yesterday, there was a fascinating conversation we had about how can we embed cosmological laws, so the alignment of human-made laws with the understanding of the cosmological laws as foundation for sustainability, regeneration, and thrivability. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about the deeper principles as we're working with new paradigm principles that are also based on a new paradigm scientific understanding of the nature of reality, consciousness as primary to the physical manifestation, and matter even as a form of consciousness, as well as the deeper architecture of our universe and life itself. And as we've been exploring in the last sessions already, what would it mean if we, even as David Orr was just saying earlier, if we were to be embedding the living system principles, where here you can see that how it has been embedded into a new governance system, also as the foundation for a new financial economic system, a new educational system too. Okay, so here we have it. Here is a drawing of the cosmic compass design. And in fact, all the little dots that you're seeing there, the white dots, hold particular coordinates of choices, of possibilities, of potentials, of responsibilities as well. I won't be going into in-depth now what those coordinates mean, but there is a whole methodology behind that. But on a broad view, the compass needs to actually guide our vision. Where are we navigating for? And then, of course, the deeper purpose. The purpose here is the little black dot in the center of the compass. Integrated within that are 3 laws of life, which I'm going to be guiding you through in a minute. There are future archetypes, 5 of them. There are also coordinates for 8 developmental values. Within it embedded are 13 key principles, new paradigm principles that are based on the kind of cosmic architecture of life, and what we need to understand about that in order to apply that to new informational systems in terms of, again, finance, economics, governance, as well as education, social change. And then there are 16 commitments as focal areas that we really need to steward together in order to make that transition and shift away from the trajectory of collapse on which we are currently and start navigating for thrivability and regeneration. And this is a very high level overview of what you see all in the design within the compass. So the little dot is based on the understanding of our universe and life as a unified reality. So that's based on the research, which actually says that the universe itself is a single coherent unified entity, and that we are seeing this unified architecture at all levels and scales of existence. And then out of that, and that's also based on a reinterpretation of the first law of thermodynamics into the law of infodynamics, and a lot of that work is based on the brilliant research of Dr. Jude Carver. And that moves us then into understanding from the law of existence as unified, how does life then change? What's the evolutionary process of change? And then we're seeing that change unfolds as a process of increasing complexity through deepening evolutionary coherence. And then the third principles and the law of balance. And this is where it's really important that we understand the systemic boundaries that regulate our interdependencies and interconnections. And what happens if we are not aware of that and we have not incorporated the informational feedback of systemic boundaries in our growth models, both economically in terms of our financial and economic systems, but also in terms of our governance. And then in the drawings below that, you start to see how all of that complexity comes together, but how the Constitution, therefore, of seats serves as a navigational tool, a compass for making decisions together to understand whether the architecture and the design and the systems that we are creating are applying that principle of unity and diversity, are becoming increasingly complex in a way that's evolutionary coherent and not polarized, and are also co-coherent with the larger realities of life, and therefore are supporting the overall balance of life for it to be able to bring forth and actualize our evolutionary potentials. Seeds Constitution starts with this declaration. The Constitution came in effect on the 10th of July of this year through its unified quorum. And it says, we as the people of Seeds adopt this Constitution as our living compass to co-create the evolutionary systems, cultures, and tools for thriving civilizations and the regeneration of our planet. Now, this Constitution also serves as a template for the development of other constitutions. So it's freely available, can be adopted and adapted and contextualized for other movements, other organizations. And that's the beauty of it, how it, from its unity, also then starts to guide a further diversification. And just very briefly, Article 1 is our vision, and with details, all of that is outlined. The entire, as I said, the entire Constitution itself is coded on blockchain. And so all of that can be seen there. So humanity as wise, joyful, and loving partners, co-creating a flourishing world together with our earth and the web of life. And then Article 2, our purpose, really brings us into the center now of the compass, that little black dot, that little cosmic potential that is within all of us, to serve the regenerative renaissance by co-creating economic governance and financial systems for regenerative and thriving civilizations. So that's the agreement from all the citizens that's really the purpose that brings us together. This is why we're doing this. And we are basing, and we have embedded these 3 laws of life, or 3 evolutionary principles, are embedded within the Constitution itself. And the first principle therefore helps us to understand that the universe is a single unified being, and how we each form part of that wholeness, and how important it is to design from that understanding and also the consciousness of wholeness. The second principle then is having that awareness that the universe evolves through deepening coherence and increasing complexity. And this is, we are applying this also in the way that we are growing as an ecosystem. So when we are seeing that there are the fractions that are starting to emerge, or too much diversity in the system that is not coherent, we go back to that principle to also be able to distinguish, is our complexity healthy, or does it start to become degenerative, and what actions do we need to take? And this is really a continuous living experiment that we're in every week, sensing, fine-tuning, listening for feedback. The third principle then is where the sacred boundaries are coming in, but also the understanding of how is consciousness now actualizing the inherent and innate cosmological potentials of this deeper unity by learning, experimenting, collaborating, reflecting, and sharing together as we're doing today. And that really reminds us then, in terms of design, the importance of honoring systemic autonomy and autopoiesis, self-creation, regulation, adaptation. And this is applied especially to look for the informational dynamics. What are we measuring? How are we understanding also what we're measuring? What feedback are we giving back into the systems? Also, what behaviors are we rewarding? It goes on the Constitution, where you see in details then how each of these principles are applied. And this is giving the 5 kind of architectural protocols for how we create our seeds operating systems. And it also means that any offsprings within the seeds ecosystems need to still go through this Constitution. The Constitution is also can evolve. People can make amendments, and that there's again a voting process to go through that when people want to evolve it further. And these are then the 8 core values, and they have both inner values as well as outer values. We see them as 4 suns and 4 moons. So the sun is really how we express ourselves outwardly, and the inner values, like a moon, help us to integrate and to come back into the center. So exploration outwardly, reciprocity more inwardly, openness, integrity, courage, trust, commitment, compassion. So it's like this up and this flowing movement. Also the masculine and feminine principles always balanced within the design. Then it goes further into 13 architecture protocols, which you can read through the Seeds Constitution. I'm cannot see right now the chat, but maybe Alexander, if you can share in the chat the SEEDS constitution, that would be great. And otherwise I'll share it after that. And this then brings us together to 16 commitments. These are the 16 coordinates on the outside of the compass, as also the 16 focal areas that we really need to steward together. But also we've designed it, this whole process as a quest, so that it is a learning process, it's a discovery process. And there are 4 pillars in these 16 commitments that really help us then how to live into this as a pledge. So that when also new citizens come on board, they go through these 16 commitments, they get also training in that, to go through the pledge. And it starts as simple as answering the call of the Renaissance quest, taking responsibility for our power, and then investing that in our thrivability and becoming the Renaissance agents. And then the next level of commitments all have to do with now, how do we develop the right tools to really support this transition to regenerative and thrivable civilizations? By, of course, applying this constitution, but also designing it, the architecture of what we're doing from healthy living systems, and creating and continuously improving our tools and protocols, so important. Becoming an architect of future civilizations, and then bringing in the partnership element to really honor and seek out who are our allies on this process. And this is what we'll be doing today in session 2, partnering with our earth for our common health, playing compassionately with others, yeah, be a good player. But also allying with our future ancestors. And remember, you are a future ancestor. And very important, celebrate the transition moments and growth. Have these rites of passage moments as well, honoring also what's dying, what's dissolving, what needs to die as well as what's emerging and seeking to be born. And then the next level is really about building our new world while transitioning from the old, because there is a lot of death and collapse happening. But there's also a lot that's emerging and seeking to be born. So opting out of systems of harm, opting into systems that can heal and regenerate our world, purposefully creating thrivable communities and ecosystems, and becoming the world we wish to live in, one seed at a time. And we have in the final article of the Constitution also really giving a voice to the earth and non-human life, and taking the fundamental position that we are all indigenous to our earth. And having said that, that we also honor indigenous guiding principles. So that brings me then to the visioning. Let's go and explore this. So let's enter into the consciousness states that are really at the foundation of the kind of new experimentations that have come up through this year. So what I'm going to ask all of you to do now is for the coming 5 to 10 minutes, just close your eyes. Just close your eyes. And take a deep breath. And bring your awareness, first of all, back to yourself. Relax into yourself. Feel your body. And become present of where you are here and now. And connect with your breath. Just breathing in and breathing out. And knowing you already are in the deepest unity with life. And we already are in the deepest unity with each other. And I'd like you to imagine and become aware how the seed potentials of a future era, a future time, already live within you. A future time of a higher order of reality that we can evolve into by recognizing what works, what doesn't work, what we need to change, and who we can become together. And allow now these seed potentials, these future potentials of this higher order of reality to activate within you. To grow stronger and awaken further. So much so that a beautiful glowing energy starts to spread to your entire body. It's the presence of the future, of a thrivable world, a world founded on the principles of our unity and wholeness and deep collaboration. And as these future potentials are activating even further within you, and this future is announcing itself within you, within your thoughts and your feelings, your dreams, your hopes. It now gives you the possibility to see into this future possibility of a thrivable world, which also has within it a whole new governance, new ways in which we as humanity are together, new ways for how we coordinate our activities, how we align our actions, how we grow, develop, and evolve. And allow the presence of this future reality now to give you the ideas, the understanding, the visions that are yours to receive from this future world, so that you in your life can take the actions necessary for co-creating this new paradigm in the way we human together and steward our planet. I will give you now a few minutes of time to explore the presence of this future within you. Good, very good. And now bring your awareness fully in the here and now, feeling your body again, and thanking our future possibility for guiding us here today. And when you're ready, you may slowly open your eyes, being fully grounded, present here. Just move your shoulders, your hands, your feet. As we are now ready to embark on the next part of our program. We are going to be for 20 minutes into small breakout groups. And we have prepared for you a Google document. Alexander or the rest of the team can just put the link in the chat. And I just ask you now to, if you are on a computer, to please click that link that will bring you to a Google document where we can write down of our visions. But I'd like to ask you to write down some of your keywords of the visions and ideas that have emerged while you're in conversation with your small breakout group. So Sam, if you could start to prepare for us the breakout groups, and then you will be getting a notice at the bottom of your computer that you're allocated to a working group. Notice well the room number to which you're being allocated, so that when you are in your small breakout group, you'll be with about 5 people. You can share with each other and make sure that everyone has an opportunity to share. So just don't take more than a few minutes, that you can rotate. Share your visions, share your feelings, share what has emerged, and then write that down, some of those keywords on the Google Doc, and also put your name on the Google Doc where the allocation is made for that.